One of his top aides in new comments is pressing for concrete and effective agreements, citing past efforts that failed to prevent Russia. New questions this morning about whether a meeting between Ukraine's President Zelensky and Russia's President Putin will actually happen.
How do you fight million-dollar missiles when your resources are running out and your factories lie in ruins? Ukraine's answer: build drones that cost less than a laptop and launch 50 of them for every missile fired at you. But here's the question that stunned defense experts. Could cheap, expendable machines really storm through Russian defenses? The answer came not in theory, but in a daring cross-border swarm attack deep inside Belgorod. And what unfolded that night forced militaries around the world to question everything they thought they knew about defense. Before we move on, I will like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. What happens when your greatest weapon is destroyed before it can even be used? That was the question Ukraine faced one night in Zaporizhia, when the future of its drone program went up in flames before it had a chance to change the battlefield.
Citing past efforts that failed to prevent Russia from going on the attack yet again.
Now overseas, where Russia is stepping up attacks on eastern Ukraine, even as the Kremlin signals it's open to ending the war.
The strike didn't target soldiers or tanks. It went straight for Plant 21, a factory that represented years of effort, prototypes, and hard-won progress. In an instant, the dream of a modern Ukrainian drone force nearly ended. The attack began with unusual silence on the sensors. Russia sent out its own electronic warfare drones, not to destroy, but to blind. These machines disrupted radar across the region, overwhelmed communication links, and created confusion at Ukraine's monitoring stations. For minutes, operators thought they were dealing with a technical fault. Then came the actual strike package. 6 caliber cruise missiles cut through the night air. They flew low, avoiding radar contact, aided by the electronic smog created by Russian jamming. Ukrainian air defense batteries scrambled, launching interceptors. Some hit their targets, knocking missiles out of the sky, scattering burning debris near villages. But 2 of the missiles broke through. Their course was precise, locked on coordinates that Russia had studied for months. At Zaporizhia, just after midnight, 2 warheads ripped into Plant 21. One tore through the main assembly hall, shattering machinery, steel framework, and the rows of incomplete drones laid out for testing. The second missile hit the fuel storage, igniting a blaze that spread with terrifying speed. Workers rushed for the exits, but many never made it to the doors. Explosions hurled concrete slabs into stairwells and brought roofs crashing down onto production lines.
It comes as the White House says it's working to set up a face-to-face meeting between Presidents Putin and Zelensky.
Even as his team is preparing action plans if Russia backs out and its assault drags on.
Engineers who had spent years designing aircraft the size of cars found themselves trapped in collapsing hangars, smoke choking the air around them. By morning, the fire still raged, its glow visible miles away. 8 engineers were dead, crushed, burned, or suffocated before rescue teams could reach them. Dozens more staggered out with burns, broken bones, shrapnel injuries. Trucks carried survivors to overcrowded hospitals, while families gathered at fences demanding news. The financial toll matched the human one. Ukraine estimated $70 million in equipment, drones, and infrastructure lost in one night. What had taken months to design and assemble was reduced to molten metal and smoldering shells in minutes. This wasn't just an attack aimed at material destruction. The Kremlin's message was sharp and deliberate. Ukraine's vision of a drone future could be erased at Russia's choosing. The strike signaled that no matter how advanced or ambitious Kyiv's plans became, Moscow could still knock them back to zero with a few missiles. It was a psychological blow as much as a strategic one, meant to seed doubt among engineers, investors, and soldiers counting on drones to change the war.
NBC's Alice Barr has the latest on Ukraine's demands and how President Trump is responding.
Observers abroad echoed that fear. Analysts warned that Ukraine's progress in autonomous aviation had been brutally set back. Months of incremental testing, foreign partnerships, and new designs had literally gone up in smoke. Some believed it marked the end of Ukraine's attempt to close the gap with Russia using robotics and artificial intelligence. If a single precision strike could wipe out a drone program hub, What chance did improvised facilities or smaller labs have of surviving the next wave? But that interpretation missed something. The attack in Zaporizhia may have burned the physical plant, but it also ignited a new resolve. Drones would not vanish from the fight. Instead, they would adapt. Ukraine was forced to consider a model less vulnerable to large-scale destruction: distributed production, makeshift assembly, and volume over perfection. Zaporizhia had been a symbol of concentration and capability. Its loss revealed a different truth, one that spread far beyond a single factory. So how does a nation rise when its future technology has been turned to ash overnight?
President Zelensky wants security guarantees for Ukraine's future to be hammered out within the next 10 days.
And its brightest minds cut down before their work could take flight. Could a pile of cheap drones really turn the tide against a military superpower? That idea sounded reckless at first, more like science fiction than strategy. Yet Ukraine began to treat it as a serious gamble after the Zaporizhia strike made clear one factory could no longer carry the future. Instead of pouring resources into a few expensive aircraft that could be destroyed in one night, the new idea was volume. Hundreds of drones, each assembled at a fraction of the cost, would fill the skies at once. It was called the Black Swarm, and it was less about perfection than about overwhelming scale. One missile might cost a Russian commander millions to launch, but Ukraine's answer was to send 50 drones in exchange, each built with parts you could find in electronics shops, spare warehouses, or ordered through civilian supply chains. The philosophy was simple: you cannot stop everything. Air defense systems are designed to track a handful of targets, not hundreds coming from multiple directions at different speeds. If half survived to reach their mark, that was already more destruction than an equivalent load of conventional rockets could purchase. Many skeptics doubted this logic. Militaries across the world had assumed power lay with billion-dollar programs: stealth bombers, hypersonic weapons, aircraft carriers. They dismissed the idea that fragile airframes powered by batteries and small motors could threaten hardened targets. Even within Ukraine, doubt lingered. Engineers worried about reliability. Commanders asked whether unproven technology could coordinate in real combat conditions. Still, the country had no choice. With Plant 21 gone, improvisation became survival.
Ukraine's President Zelensky saying overnight his meeting with Putin is necessary to end the war.
Universities redirected research funds to drone laboratories. Startups abandoned commercial projects to weld together prototypes for the front lines. In basements and backyards, hobbyists converted consumer drones into weapons platforms by attaching small explosive charges. Volunteer networks funneled donations to buy foreign components, then smuggled them in through neighboring countries. What emerged was less an industry and more a movement, distributed, unpredictable, and impossible to wipe out with one strike. The Black Swarm grew from these scattered efforts, not from a central command, but from communities determined to put something into the air. The test came in Belgorod. The operation was carefully planned, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a practical demonstration. For weeks, reconnaissance tracked fuel stores, radar stations, and mobile command posts across the Russian border. Drones rolled out by the dozen, hidden in trucks and barns, before being launched within range. On the chosen night, the swarm crossed in waves. The first group carried small explosives, each targeted at fuel tanks and lightly protected facilities. The second acted as decoys, drawing fire from air defenses, deliberately cluttering radar screens and forcing Russian gunners to panic. A smaller set carried jammers, broadcasting interference to cut into communication lines and disrupt missile targeting. What followed was chaos. Explosions erupted across Belgorod as fuel depots lit the sky. Fireballs spread through parked vehicles and ammunition stockpiles. The dull green of radar screens suddenly blinked out, their operators overwhelmed by dozens of false contacts as real drones slipped through. Russian forces fired interceptor missiles costing millions apiece, destroying machines that cost less than a month's rent, all while more drones kept coming. By the early hours, Belgorod was burning, smoke rising from tanks and warehouses. The strike on Zaporizhia was supposed to bury Ukraine's drone ambitions, but instead it forced a change that rewrote the battlefield. Rather than one central factory, countless small workshops spread production, turning destruction into resilience. War stopped being about how much a nation spent on steel and missiles and started being defined by how fast it could adapt, improvise, and multiply a weapon so cheap it could be built in garages. 100 drones struck Belgorod and forced a rethink of defenses. So the real question becomes, what happens when the swarm is no longer hundreds, but thousands?